Hi, Senator Timberlake and Senator Myrie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, good. And your camera and sound is good. Senator Myrie,
Yes.
Good evening.
good evening. Hi, Malcolm. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. And I can
Awesome,
hear
April.
you clearly.
Good.
Good. Thank you for
Good.
joining.
Well, thank you.
All right. Taylor, we can let everyone else in.
All right, will do.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining, and thank you to those who participated in the phone bank right before the call. Major shout out to Jasmine Mateus, president of Essex County Young Dems, who helped to really facilitate and make that happen. So we have a really packed agenda tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and start our program. Just a few opening words that this initiative started because on the evening that President Biden endorsed VP Kamala Harris, there was a call where I think the number is 44,000 Black women got together on Zoom, such that they broke Zoom. And I'm one of the people who had to join from someone who was in the Zoom through someone else's Zoom. So that number is probably closer to 60,000 people. And I think Win with Black Women gave a great blueprint. And after that, we saw many groups come forward to have calls just like this one. And so I thought that having a Caribbean Diaspora for Kamala Harris event would be fitting. She is our sister. She is one of us, and I'm just so glad to be here tonight, and I'm so grateful that we're getting to witness this point in time of history. So I am going to turn over the program to Pastor Sean Edwards to lead us in an opening prayer.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be on. Thank you, Rosalind, and truly appreciate the opportunity. I hail from the greatest Jamaica in the West Indies and representing that heritage tonight. Truly excited to share with everyone. Before we pray, I just wanted to share something briefly because I think it might inform our discussion tonight. I recently posted the promotional flyer signaling my participation in tonight's Caribbean Diaspora for Kamala Harris event. And a pastor that I used to admire publicly responded to this flyer that we're seeing in the background here with the following. He said, "So it doesn't matter to you that they push an agenda against God and his word, abortion, the mutilation of children, homosexuality, and transgenderism for a few, but you're probably idol worshipers supporting color and gender over truth." Faith leaders reached out to me and asked why didn't I publicly respond with a venomous blowback to put said pastor in his place. And my response tonight invokes my Jamaican compatriot, Marcus Messiah Garvey, who said, "Pay no attention to the man who criticizes unless he's doing something better than what he criticizes. And so tonight, I want to set the context for this prayer. I cannot join the cult of Trump in the name of faith in Christ, where the man that my pastor friend advocates for has put forward decidedly unchristian acts in public, which have included belittling people with developmental disabilities, speaking crudely about groping women, and speaking sympathetically about the racist alt-right. A former president who told thousands of lies while in office, who's been impeached twice, found liable for sexual assault, fraud, and convicted for a slew of crimes. I cannot stand with a candidate that encouraged the January 6th insurrection, attempted to overturn a fair election, one who has cheated on taxes and cheated on wives, and allegedly with an adult film star. I shall not be moved. And so I want to come tonight to pray that the Harris-Walz administration gets the opportunity to put the plans for America in place. We want to come to pray tonight that the Harris administration, their plans will align with the plans of the conscious people of this diaspora who have outlined what is necessary to see economic mobility, increase funding for small businesses and communities of color, and specifically for community development financial institutions, making permanent and highly funded community advantage loan programs, and seeing continued infusions of capital and infrastructure to shore up the previously neglected communities that we represent. So having said all of that, tonight I see the light, and it is being carried by the conscious ticket of Kamala Harris. Let's pray. God, we are praying for a covering of protection over Vice President Harris tonight. Guard her heart and her mind. We pray that you would have her curate strategies and gender policies and approve legislation that would empower your people, this nation, and the world. We pray for a new day, a fresh start with an executive that will show that in God we truly trust. We pray that the God who can put the broken pieces together, the God of the rebuild, the God of compassion, the God of love, the God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. So Lord, help us not to be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap a harvest if we faint not. And we're believing, God, that you would guide, keep, protect, shore up, inform, instruct, direct, redirect this Harris ticket for all to come and benefit. All in agreement, come into contact with me and into the chat by saying it is so and it is due season. We say amen, amen. In Jesus' name I pray.
Thank you, Pastor Edwards, and shout out to Reverend Janelle Green for bringing you into the fold of this event. I know that there are folks who've reached out saying that they want to explore a longer term policy agenda unifying the Caribbean diaspora. And I'm really glad that we have some speakers tonight that have walked down that path and understand what it's going to take in order to keep this momentum and unity going. So I want to introduce our first speaker, Senator Myrie from the borough of Brooklyn. He is here tonight to give us some words about freedom, some words about VP Harris, and how we're going to win this thing. Senator Myrie?
Thank you so much, Rosalind. And let me just give the virtual applause to you and all of the folks who have organized this, who have given space, who have made space for our Caribbean brothers and sisters. I am a proud son of the Caribbean, and I am so glad that we have been coming together as a people to support our Vice President and Governor Walz. Look, when people show you who they are, you got to believe them the first time. And we have seen what the folks on the other side have done when they are in power. The pastor mentioned that they literally stormed the Capitol in the name of a stolen election. I chair the elections committee. I made over 100 changes to the election law in New York. So I am very familiar about the particulars about how our democracy works. And make no mistake that should they be in a position to contest this election, that they are going to take this to another level. That's not empty rhetoric. That's not hyperbole. That is them showing us what they were about the last time and them preparing to do the same again. But we're here to speak positivity into this space. We're here with a positive message about our vice president. And I've heard some people in my state, in my neighborhood say, well, we're not a swing state, so it doesn't necessarily matter if we come out strong. Wrong. The numbers need to be overwhelming so that there is no question beyond a shadow of a doubt that Vice President Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. Everything within our power. I heard Rosalind mention that some of you are doing phone banking. Thank you for that. If you have the ability to make phone calls, to get on a bus, to do some posting, to write some postcards, now is the time to do it because the election is going to be incredibly close. And let me also say this, as someone who is recently married, someone who is looking to expand our family, the policies that the Harris administration is putting forward are going to have a very real impact on us. That first-time home buyer tax credit, that ability to have affordable childcare, taking care of our small businesses, allowing economic opportunity, that is real stuff for those of us who have parents that came here for the American dream. Both of my parents worked in factories when they got to Brooklyn, and they eventually went on to become small business owners, to become a public school teacher. Our path to success is about opportunity, giving us a chance as middle-class New Yorkers and Americans. That is what this administration is going to be focused on. So I don't want to hear any of the complaints. I don't want to hear about any stagnation. Our republic is at stake. And if we do not step up and do so in very big ways, there's no do-over. We don't get to go back and cast our votes again. This is our chance to do it right now, within this next week and a half. So everything you have, it is time to get on it right now. I know what I'm going to be doing. Everything within my power to elect this vice president to be the next president of the United States. And in order for her to get her agenda done, we got to take the Congress as well. So if you can help some Congress members that are in trouble, if you can help take some Republican seats, and I know we got folks from all across the country, we're going to need that as well, because those policies will not come into effect with a Republican-controlled Congress. So let's do everything we can to elect our vice president. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling optimistic. Let's do everything to elect a Democratic-controlled Congress so we can have Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, and that we can have the policies that this vice president is dedicated to doing. So thank you so much for giving me some space, for allowing me to kick it off tonight. Let's go get it done, and let's get it done together as a people.
Thank you so much, Senator Myrie, for being here and for your remarks. And who knows, the next time I see you, I might be saying Mayor Myrie.
Come on now, that's a different Zoom, Rosalind. That's a different Zoom.
Okay, we'll do a Caribbean Diaspora next year. We're going to win the election that's right around the corner, and then 2025 we'll regroup.
That's right. One race at a time.
And I love what you said about not taking anything for granted, because we think that we have it in the bag, especially in geographies like New York and the tri-state area. There is a website, NewYork4Harris.com, where you can see bus trips to Pennsylvania, to do canvassing. So if you are in the New York tri-state area, go to newyorkforharris.com to look at the schedule. They have done a good job of trying to spread out the pickup locations, and I think that it's a great initiative for those of you who have capacity to do so. So I want to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Brianna Armstead. I had the pleasure of meeting her through Essex County Young Democrats, and I was so impressed when I met her. She is probably one of the youngest elected officials that I know, and I'm excited to see her trajectory. Brianna, turning it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rosalind, for having me. I want to give a big shout out to Jasmine Metellus. It's so imperative that we continue organizing. We are at a crossroads, and everything that we care about is on the line: abortion rights, voting rights, civil rights. Women are dying. Amber Thurman, a 28-year-old mother, lost her life because she couldn't access abortion care in Georgia, and her death was preventable. And this is the reality that we face after the reversal of Roe versus Wade. It's putting women's lives at risk, and we cannot afford another loss to dangerous policies. Donald Trump has said that this can be the last election where we have the right to vote. Our democracy is under attack. Immigrant rights are also at stake. Trump is pushing mass deportations of Haitian immigrants and spreading hateful rhetoric that makes them fear for their safety, fear for their lives, and fear for their future. There's police immunity. Donald Trump endorses unchecked violence. Tyrone McAlpin, a 34-year-old man, was brutally assaulted by the police despite being hearing impaired and having cerebral palsy. Imagine a world where Kamala does not win. Imagine a world where crimes like this go unpunished. I fear for my baby brothers and for every Black person who is treated as a target rather than a human being. Trump wants to defund the Department of Education, cutting funding to schools that teach about slavery as an attempt to erase the history of our ancestors. We cannot allow him to control our future by rewriting our past. This is why Kamala Harris matters. She's brought hope and energy back to the Democratic Party, a party that many feared had lost its fire. She's shown us that we have power, that we must fight for justice, and that we will not back down, because when we fight, we win. Early voting starts this weekend, everybody. Don't wait until November 5th when the lines are long and when the wait will be tough. Vote early. Make your voice be heard now. If you have a vote by mail ballot, turn it in as soon as possible. This election is way too important for us to delay. This is not about Republicans versus Democrats. It's about our values, our freedoms, and the future of our children. As a member of NEON, which is the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network, and being on their executive board in my town's Board of Education, I know how crucial it is to promote civic engagement, especially amongst our youth. We have to put our children first and create a world where they feel safe and seen. I work tirelessly to lead by action and advocacy, and I encourage you all to do the same, to speak out, to promote on your social media platforms, to tell a friend to get out to vote. Drag somebody with you to the polling booth. If you know somebody hasn't voted already, encourage them to do early voting and submit their BBMs. I please urge you to get out the vote. This election is about protecting the rights that so many have fought for and so many have died for. It's about our communities. It's about our families. It's about our future. Together, we can ensure that Kamala Harris leads us towards a brighter tomorrow where every life and voice is valued. Thank you guys so much for your time. And again, please get out the vote. Our lives and our freedoms are on the line. We do not have the luxury to wait.
Thank you so much, Brianna, and thank you for encouraging early voting. I know that the start date, like you said, is October 26th in New Jersey. So everyone, you're able to vote early. If you just look up vote.gov, you'll be able to get routed to your geography to see what the deadlines and dates are for voting early. I would like to introduce our next speaker, who was gracious enough to take time away from the work that is happening in Michigan in order to speak with us tonight. As many of you know, Michigan is a battleground state, and I am very excited to bring Josh Thomas up to share some more about the operations that are happening there and how we can support Michigan in these last days leading up to the election.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to start off by just saying thank you, Rosalind, for having me and allowing me to come here and be here tonight to speak with everyone. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a recent graduate from Tufts University, where I studied computer science and engineering. And so I'm sure many people are wondering how did I get involved in politics. But I will say that I always had a passion for politics and community engagement since I was young, seeing the influence that my parents had on me and the type of work that they would do in the community, as well as the things that I would do growing up. And so after I graduated college, I wanted to come back home to get involved in the community again. As Brianna has said, one of the things that I did while I was here was help get people out to vote early in the primaries, because thankfully in Michigan, we are one of the lucky states that has early voting. And so when I initially saw that Biden had dropped out and that Kamala Harris was going to be the nominee, I decided that I wanted to get even more involved. Similar to Kamala and what her mother told her, something my dad always told me growing up is like, what are you going to do about it? And so in an election this important, when there are so many things that are on the line for the ballot, when it comes to student debt, reproduction rights, how we view immigrants, and also just democracy itself, I knew that me just voting wasn't going to be enough. And so I decided to join the campaign as a campus organizer, where I spend most of my time at Wayne State University in Midtown Detroit, just speaking with students, talking about what issues are important to them, and encouraging them to get registered to vote, and also helping them get registered to vote as well. And so during my time on the campaign, I eventually started to help out other different organizers in different fields and departments. So I've also spoken at a couple of churches as well, to a group not too dissimilar to this as well, and also help support the youth department as well by phone banking for their schools, and also trying to get people to come out for them as well. And so I think that this election is like really, I think this election is just like really important because of a lot of the reasons that have already been said today. As a student, with someone with student loan debt, I already know that when it comes to between Harris or Trump, there's a very clear option in terms of who's going to help fight for me, and also the job opportunities that I'm looking for as well when it comes to being a recent college graduate. And I think that, again, like the best thing we can be doing right now is not just voting, but also donating our time as well. And I'm sure most people here do know that in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the election by simply 2 votes per precinct, and which means that if 2 more people in all those districts had come out in support for Hillary, Trump never would have even seen the Oval Office. And so part of the reason as well that I joined the campaign is because I know that when I wake up the day after the election, I want to wake up knowing that I did everything I could do to help get not only Harris and Walz elected, but other Democrats who are running here in Michigan. We have 2 Supreme Court justices who are on the ballot for Michigan, as well as our senator is also up for election. And I believe that, echoing what Senator Myrie said, that it's important not just to help get Harris elected, but also give her the team that can be in place to help push forward the policies and ideas that she wants to see. And so we do a lot of different things, whether it be phone banking, canvassing, door knocking, putting together packets. And actually, in fact, I had a friend who's an organizer as well, who hosted an out-of-state phone banking session where we had about 30 people. And it lasted for like about 1.5 hours. But in that 1.5 hours, we were able to make about 2,000 calls. And we had like a 20% answer rate, which is 400 people. And if we have 10 of those, that's 4,000 people, which is almost half of the votes that Hillary lost by in the last election. And so that's why I'm here. And it's because, again, like I think it's important that we are doing the work to help get Hillary elected, and to help get Kamala elected and other Democrats as well. And that's also why I did share a link with Rosalind, which I hope that she shares out with all of you, that if you want to get involved here in Michigan, you can please sign up. We will teach you how to do it. Before you go out, we teach you how to do it on the Zoom call as well before you start making calls. And we'll be there the entire time to help guide you through it and answer any questions that you might have. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. And if you do have the link handy, we're going to strike while the iron is hot and put it in the chat. And I know that there's a chat on Zoom, there's a chat on YouTube. After the program, I will make sure that I send out the link and that we funnel volunteers to assist you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and all the work that you are doing to get Kamala Harris elected.
No, thank you.
I would like to introduce this next speaker who I happened to meet in the process of planning the first Caribbean Diaspora event. Karen Andreu is the co-chair of the Caribbean Americans for Kamala Harris, and they have been doing a phenomenal job of bringing folks together, similar to what we're doing tonight, on a national scale to funnel volunteers, to provide resources, to provide data and insights about the election. And one thing I knew from the first time that I spoke to her is that she loves this community, and I'm just really honored that she's here tonight. So Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thanks for having me, and good evening, everyone. Good evening, Caribbean Massive. I come from today in Bethesda, Maryland, but a proud daughter of Haitian American. I'm a proud Haitian American and daughter of Haitian immigrants. And in my former life, I served as an immigration attorney. So many of the issues that have been mentioned have been part of my life's fabric. As a little bit of introduction for this evening, as Rosalind said in her gracious introduction, I worked in both the Biden and the Obama administrations. And I can vividly remember watching the policies made then and now that have literally impacted the lives of Americans. And that's why, for me, this election, as all of them are so very is so very personal. When I entered the White House, the top of this administration, in the middle of COVID, with the economy on fire, with COVID rampant and everything collapsing, the four pillars of the administration's top priorities were tackling climate change, tackling the economy, and eventually passing the American Rescue Plan, getting COVID under control, and branching out from there. And I'm proud to say that as a person who worked on the campaign in 2020, I know in terms of economic progress, I know no less than almost 24 people who've had their student debt relief canceled, which has had a trajectory changing impact on their financial lives. I know so many people who are still screaming today about the price of homes and cars and rental units and housing and food, which is a major issue in this campaign. And the current administration, and we hope the next administration, is starting to tackle corporate America's obsession with price gouging. These are some of the kitchen table bread and butter issues that have a deep impact on people, that make a difference in their ability to live or to just thrive. And so for me, when I approach this election, as I do all of them, there's an offense and a defense that we have to play. Voting is so personal for me. It is literally my voice. I literally watched a video today of a 86-year-old woman saying that in 1960, when she tried to vote in Mississippi, she had to pay $2. That was a impediment placed into the system at the time to try to discourage voting in the Deep South for African Americans. And so I have inherited the right and the privilege to vote for free, openly, to cast my vote, to wear a bumper sticker or a t-shirt without threat of undue intimidation. It used to be a time where we didn't have to worry about that. These days are getting a little worrisome, but more so than in many other countries, I'm free to walk around and say who I support, who I love, and how I want to live. And I don't take any of those freedoms for granted, and neither should we. But more importantly, it's not just about me. It's not just about us. I'm a public servant at heart. I'm a connector at heart, and I'm a historian at heart. And so when you're a historian, you also can also be a futurist. Knowing our history, for me, makes me want to lean in to create a better tomorrow, right? Because if past is prologue, we have a lot to be worried about when it comes to the specter of a second Trump administration. So because I'm other-centered, though, when I go to vote, and I hope we all keep this in mind, I'm not voting just for myself. I'm voting for my mother, who's a senior. I want to make sure that her prescription drugs, she takes good care of herself, but if she should need prescription drugs, that she can afford them, that she doesn't have to split the pills in half or send for them in Canada or send for them or buy them in places where she may not be sure that what she's getting is proper and safe for her because the prescription drug prices are so high. And one thing I hope to see Kamala Harris administration do is continue the work that President Biden did in making sure that now the U.S. government can negotiate the prescription drug prices. That's something that they just passed in the last month or so, something that could not be done before. I think about my brother, a tall, 6'4" African-American man. Haitian American, African American, doesn't matter when the nightstick comes down, where he's from, whether he has an accent or what his last name is. He's always got a lot on his mind. He's a small business owner. He's always scowling because he's always thinking. That's intimidating for far too many people in our society, whether it's a Karen, yes, I use the name Karen, or a police officer, right? So I since he was 11 and became 6 foot tall, I've had a grip of fear around my heart for his safety. I pray a hedge of protection around him every single day of my life since he's been 11. He is now 43 years old because he's a Black man in America. So a candidate who would offer police immunity has put a bullseye on my brother and every Black man's life. And I cannot stand aside and watch that happen. He's also a small business owner. So I hope he can take advantage of the $50,000 program that Kamala Harris is promising as part of her next administration. He's also hoping to be a homeowner. And I hope he can take advantage of that $25,000 that she is offering as part of her administration. So I'm voting for him. I'm voting for his daughters, my nieces, that one, they do have a Department of Education that is going to still be around to make sure that they get a quality education, because much of what is happening in this country is a lack of critical thinking because of the dumbing down of far too much of our education system. Imagine what this country will look like with a diminished or abolished education system. And as the young lady said earlier, with an erasure of our history and our contributions to this great land. So I'm voting for all their reproductive rights as well. God forbid they should ever be harmed or touched in an inappropriate way and a pregnancy results. Or should they have a medical complication around a pregnancy? Or should they decide that it is not the proper time in their lives to give birth? That is their right between them, their pastor, their priest, and their God, not for the government to interfere in. So I'm voting for them. And I don't want them to have a glass ceiling on their heads about what's possible for them as women in America, in politics, or in any sphere, in any place that they want to enter and bring a new level of feminine-centered leadership, other-centered leadership, not where might makes right, but that we gather together and figure out what is good for the consensus, like every mother does, like every woman has to do in her family. I look for them, I vote for them. Of course, I'm voting for our Caribbean Massive. We come here to these shores, we make America better. We make America great, and we always have. And we have been doing it for centuries. And, I tell Americans whenever I can, because of the Haitian Revolution, the Louisiana Purchase happened, and the Lewis and Meriwether expedition happened. I always say, you're welcome. So it's not just Haitians. It's, as somebody mentioned, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It's Malcolm X, whose mother was from Grenada, and so many other leaders whose parents had heritage in the islands. Our Caribbean Massive has been part of the fabric of this country. And I also want to see not only those of us who are here be protected and thrive, but that the policies that a government from a president in this country has on our region, whether it's engaging with CARICOM as partners, not as flunkies, not as former colonial peons, but as partners to address things like climate change. Dame Motley from says bravely, loudly spoken out about how the lack of climate change controls in the Western world are ruining the paradise that we live in, that we all hope to go back and live in and vacation in. So I'm also voting for us, for our communities in here, in our communities back home, in our seas and our ecosystems, so that our thriving, beautiful Caribbean region is not destroyed by the greed and the lack of responsibility, which is why I would like to see a continuity of the Biden to Harris administration to continue the important work on climate change. And now, lastly, I'm reminded that if Donald Trump had his way and implemented police immunity during his first term, Derek Chauvin, George Floyd's killer, would not be in jail today. And I'll remind you that it was the governor of Minnesota, one Tim Walz, who tapped Keith Ellison, former Congress member Keith Ellison, who had become AG of Minnesota, to do what needed to be done to properly prosecute those police officers. So as the brother said earlier, it's not just about who's at the top of the ticket, it's also who we're sending to Congress, resending to Congress, or sending for the first time. It's also about the judiciary. Donald Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices in 4 years. But on top of that, lifelong, right? On top of that, he appointed a total, including the Supreme Court justice, 234 federal and lifelong judges. He approved 3 Supreme Court justices. He approved 174 U.S. District Court judges, and I forget the exact number, 54 judges of the U.S. Court of Appeals. That's the power that lies in the hands of the next president. And as Kamala Harris says, we're not going back. We have to play offense and defense. And lastly, I'll leave you with a story of a friend of mine who was improperly indicted for a case. This is like late 90s, early 2000s. Young Black man ended up in prison. And he reminded me when he finally made it out that it was a Bill Clinton federally appointed judge that he was able to appeal to and show how he was innocent, that finally released him from prison when he was improperly imprisoned. So these positions, this is why they're fighting so hard on the other side. They understand that they are going to make policies and put people in place that are going to impact our lives for the next half century, potentially to century. The things that they can undo, they can do, it will take us years, if not decades, to undo. And lastly, as we talk about electing people up and down the ticket, I will end with a story of myself sitting in law school in 1996. I'm showing my age here, and don't let the good melanin fool you. Sitting in law school in 1996 at the University of Miami when the Timothy McVeigh bomb in Oklahoma went off. Domestic terrorists, white homegrown terrorists. But what did the Newt Gingrich-led Congress do under a Democratic president, Bill Clinton? They pushed through legislation called IRA, which was anti-immigrant legislation, which dictated that any immigrant in the United States, even if they had a green card and had been here from childhood, once convicted of a crime and served their crime, will be deported back to their home country. What did the immigrants in the United States have to do with Oklahoma? Nothing. But this is the fear mongering. This is an example of what happens when we don't elect everybody we need to do up and down the ticket. So it's not just important to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. We have to make a difference at the state level, and we have to make a difference at the federal level as well. Because when we look at some of our island nations now that are plagued by gangs and overrun by hardened criminals, even in Latin America, when you have the proliferation of MS-13, I'm connecting the dots for you, that this is a pattern and a practice that has come from a law implemented in 1996 that had nothing to do with immigrants, everything to do with white homegrown terrorists, but the Congress manipulated the issue for their day. Sound familiar? Fear mongering at its worst. So everyone has already stated how much is at stake here. I won't belabor the point. I understand that there are things we don't agree with. I'm not happy about Palestine either, but I would rather argue and hold accountable Kamala Harris than to sit idly by and watch Donald Trump build resorts in Gaza, as he and his son-in-law have already said that they look to do. I would rather prop up a Kamala Harris to go head to head with Putin than to watch Donald Trump make googly eyes and try to make more money off of his allegiance with Putin and other dictators around the world. So democracy is not perfect. What we can influence policy and hold the Democratic Party to account if we stay engaged beyond Election Day. Democracy is not a spectator sport. We got to get on the field, make this happen, and then stay engaged beyond November 5th. Thank you for your time. Sorry if I ran over a little bit. As you can tell, I'm a little passionate about this issue. Appreciate you, and I will see you all in the field, because after this, it's all phone banks or all knocking on doors for me. See you all in the field. God bless.
Thank you so much, Karen, for being here and for your remarks. If you have the links from the Caribbean Americans for Kamala Harris platform, we will share those out as well. I think there are ample opportunities for people to volunteer such that, you know, we can win this thing. Thank you. Our next speaker is a phenomenal woman that I have recently come to know through the Democratic organization that is based in Essex County, New Jersey. Last year, the chairman had brought me on to do paid media for the candidates, and Assemblywoman Morales was one of them. And when she was elected, she became the first Puerto Rican Assemblywoman in the state of New Jersey. And I'm so excited to hear her remarks tonight, and I'm so grateful that she's here. Assemblywoman?
Thank you so much, Rosalind, and thank you for all of those who put this speaking engagement together. I was told to bring our flag, and I see some of you all on this Zoom representing your flag, so I brought my flag, Boricua, Puerto Rican, and you know, if you know anything about the Puerto Rican history, we are very proud of this Puerto Rican flag, because at one time in history, we were not allowed to fly this flag on the island. We will literally get arrested for flying this flag on our island until that law was obsolete and people were so proud of waving this flag. So I am waving my flag tonight. So I love what everyone has shared this evening already. I am excited about getting Kamala Harris elected, and there's so many reasons why. Most of you already shared the reasons why it's so critical to come out and vote in this election. But I'm gonna speak through the lens of being a Puerto Rican woman, where my parents came from Puerto Rico to the mainland to have a better opportunity. And so a little bit, since everyone's sharing a history, let me give you a little bit of history about Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico, you know, many people may not know this, but it is a US territory. And currently there are about 3.1 million residents who are US citizens but they cannot vote in the general presidential election. 3.1 million residents on the island who cannot vote for general presidential election, although they are US citizens. The island is impacted and affected by so many federal policies related to disaster recovery, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes when Hurricane Maria hit the island. When we talk about healthcare, when we talk about economic development, these are issues that fall under the president's purview, and Puerto Rico's well-being is tied to the United States national interests, including military strategy and trade in the Caribbean, right? So although residents in Puerto Rico cannot vote in the US presidential election, Puerto Ricans who live on the mainland, we can vote and we can influence the election. Currently, there are 5.1 million Puerto Ricans living on the mainland where they can vote and make an impact as to who's going to be the next president. So when we talk about eligible voters, based on the 2020 presidential election, there were around 32 million eligible Latino voters, making them the largest racial or ethnic minority group in the United States. They represented 13.3% of all eligible voters. The turnout, listen to this, the turnout of Latino voters in 2020 was about 53.7%, which was an increase from the 2016 election when we had to vote for Hillary Clinton, right? So when the 2016 election happened, there was about 47.6% of those who voted. And I think when Trump came into office, Latinos were like, oh no, we cannot have this happen, right? So 53.7%, but Latinos are key voters. And they have significant influence, especially in swing states. So let's talk about some of these swing states like Florida, like Texas and Arizona and Nevada. So in Florida, 20% of eligible voters were Latino in 2020. So what does that mean? We have a huge impact in this election. We need Latinos to come out and vote. We need Latinos to feel like their voices are going to be heard. I have to tell you a story about my dad. My dad never voted in any election. His first election that he voted on was my election last year. And when I spoke to him about why he doesn't want to come out to vote, his words to me was, why? Are they really making an difference? Look at what's happening in Puerto Rico. So let's talk about Hurricane Maria. And if anyone remembers the failed administration of Donald Trump towards Hurricane Maria, Puerto Ricans will never forget. They will never forget that moment where Donald Trump's administration failed the Puerto Rican community. It was widely criticized as one of the worst and slowest and inadequate response to Hurricane Maria. The lack of urgency, the lack of resources that left Puerto Rico in a prolonged humanitarian crisis with power outages that lasted for months. I had family members that were impacted by that. The inadequate medical care and the insufficient federal aid. So we will not forget the disrespect. And if anyone saw this during that 2017 Hurricane Maria incident where Donald Trump went to Puerto Rico and started tossing paper towels into the crowd of hurricane survivors. This was totally disrespectful. This is the man that is running for office again, and we should never forget how disrespectful he was to those on the mainland. So let's talk about why we need Kamala in office. Let's talk about Kamala's commitment to the Latino communities. She has consistently demonstrated her commitment to the Latino communities by always advocating for policies that impact economic inequality, impact healthcare access, and let's not forget about education reform. Someone already spoke about it. If Donald Trump gets elected, the Department of Education will be obsolete. I'm an educator. I'm in a school district. What does that mean for us? Federal funding will not come to the districts who need it the most if we don't have a Department of Education. We cannot let that man get back into office. So what has Kamala done for us? First of all, Kamala Harris was very vocal and supportive during Puerto Rico's recovery efforts after Hurricane Maria. Let's not forget that. And Kamala Harris, she's outlined plans to increase economic opportunities for Latino families by supporting small businesses, creating more job training programs, and promoting access to affordable housing, which is what everyone needs. All of which are key to improving economic standing of Latinos and Puerto Ricans in communities. So let's not forget why this election is very important. We cannot go back to 2017. And what does Kamala Harris says? We cannot go back. We will never go back. We need to move forward. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak through this lens. And I hope that those who are so, it's scary to think that people are still undecided. You either know who you're gonna vote for or you're not gonna vote at all. There shouldn't be an undecided vote right now. Make sure you come out to vote. We need every voice to count. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Morales. I take my hat. Well, not so much my hat. I have a lot of hair, but I push back my hair for all the educators out there that at sometimes are really raising America's children. And that became evident through COVID-19. So just thank you for all you do. I'm excited to see what you're going to do next. I know this is your first term and you're up for re-election next year. So,
Yes.
so I guess after we win this one, we're going to hit the ground running for 2025. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everyone, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We had the lead director from Pennsylvania on the call earlier. He had a little fire drill and had to run, but we will be sending out the links for volunteers to participate in the activities going on in Pennsylvania. There will be virtual opportunities. And then, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, there is a robust schedule of buses leaving from different parts of New York City going to Pennsylvania for canvassing. If you've never done any of these activities before, please do not worry. When you sign up, you will get the training that you need to be successful. So I hope some of you will take advantage of that opportunity and not be too shy to go knock on doors. So our next part of the program is a panel discussion, which is different than the format that we have followed for this call traditionally. And I thought it was important to bring a group of women together who had some skin in the game and understand how challenging it can be for women and women of color in particular to run for office. And then once you're in the office, the unique challenges that are presented to actually fulfill the policies and initiatives that are important to your constituency. So I have Senator Brittany Timberlake from New Jersey. She wears many hats. She is an advocate for social justice, housing, and education. She is a nonprofit leader. She is an environmental justice champion. And the thing that she doesn't get enough credit for is that she's an incredible friend. The next speaker that will be on our panel is Jennifer Andreu from the city of Plantation, Florida. Jennifer ran a very historic race to be a part of the city council there, becoming the first African American and Jamaican woman to serve on the council. She has over 30 years of public leadership. She has been involved with organizations like the NAACP, Jamaican Women of Florida, Girl Scouts of Southeast Florida, and I'm really excited to hear her remarks tonight. Then we also have Melissa Watson Ward. She is the affiliate director for Emerge, who has joined us in the place of Ashanti, who could not be here tonight because she wasn't feeling well. And Ashanti is someone who's working all over the country to get women elected. I think the last number I heard that since she's been in that position running the national organization is helping about 6,000 women. So I know that sounds like a big number, but there's room for more of us to run. And I hope that tonight and this particular election season inspires some of you to consider it. And so, with having Melissa Watson Ward here, she is like really familiar and high up in Emerge and all of the operations that they are running. She has a background in public health and social work. She's active in the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Go Deltas. And she is going to really, I'm excited to hear what she says about just how to really run for office. So I'm going to start with Councilwoman Andreu. What inspired you to run for office? And how do you think you bring a unique perspective as a woman of color to the role that you're in?
Thank you, Rosalind, for having us this evening. And so I am probably exactly a great candidate for Melissa. I'm a lifelong educator, as you stated earlier, 30 years in education. I was one of the youngest assistant principals and principals in Miami-Dade County. And I had no aspirations whatsoever to run for political office. But as everybody experienced COVID, and somebody already had mentioned earlier, you know, we were kind of at a crossroads and everything was happening. We were in lockdown. And I just remember more even than George Floyd, it was Ahmaud Arbery for me. The house next door to me had a hoarder in it, and I had started attending council meetings because of that. And I had still no ambition to run personally. But when I went to the chamber, and having lived here and grown up here all my life in the city of Plantation, Florida, I found out there had never been any person of color in our history, in our 70-year history. I was taken aback because I had not realized that. And others had run, but just hadn't been successful and been able to break that glass ceiling. And it was the Ahmaud Arbery case that really just impacted me. And I got tired of crying and praying. And I said, as we're all saying tonight, do something, do something. So I decided to run for city council, and everybody thought I was crazy. They didn't think I could win. It was a very grassroots effort. I was definitely just going out, knocking on doors, calling people, talking to people. Everybody was outside riding their bicycles and in the evening, and I just walked every single neighborhood. I knocked on over 10,000 doors and was able to be successful. And my passion is really driven by being a woman of color and making a difference in my community, again, where I grew up, where I'm raising my children who are third generation plantation residents. So I have a deep sense of responsibility, recognizing that shared experience that we have and the importance of supporting and advocating for all women, and especially for Black women. Yeah. When we know when you're faced with racism, sexism, ageism, it will fuel a desire to advocate for change. And that's what fuels me on a daily basis. Black women are the most resilient women in this planet, and Caribbean women, the Caribbean Massive, even more so. That is what ignited me to run, and that is exactly what keeps me running on a daily basis. So again, you have to take up space, and somebody earlier in the chat mentioned Shirley Chisholm. We pull up a chair to the table so that we can affect change. And I think I've been able to do that this first term. I just completed my first 4 years, and I was very happy to say I was unopposed for the second term. So I look forward to continuing to make this difference right here in Plantation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And there's a saying, and I know the next speaker, Senator Timberlake, knows it well, that was it nice women or well-behaved women don't make history. So kudos to you for going against the grain. Senator Timberlake, same question. What inspired you to pursue leadership and continue to be an advocate in the many spaces that you're in?
Thank you so much, Rosalind. And let me just say, you're also a great friend and an amazing professional. And as you are a member of the Caribbean Diaspora, I know that Jamaica is very proud of their daughter because you are doing amazing work. And this is about democracy and freedom. And thank you for, promoting that. We're making history as we are doing everything we can to get Kamala Harris across the finish line. The pastor who prayed and opened us up, he actually spoke about community development financial institutions. And it's so interesting because although I'm a New Jersey state senator, I'm actually in the home state of Kamala Harris right now in California. And I have my Kamala Harris pin on that says freedom. Shout out to Marcia Marley who gave me this. And you know what? I'm here for something called the Opportunity Finance Network Conference, which is all about community development and financial institutions and making sure that they are doing right on behalf of our community and creating the housing that we need and the economic development that we need to close the racial wealth gap. So for me, that's where it all started. I am the founder of a community land trust, the only operating community land trust for the purposes of affordable housing in the state of New Jersey. And we create affordable homeownership opportunities. And in doing that work, I was asked to run for office. And after making sure that the people understood that I would not be putting my bullhorn down permanently, that I'm still always going to be an advocate and a community advocate at heart, as well as in practice. But just this time, having the opportunity to pick up also a pen to legislate and write laws, I agreed and ran for office and happened to win. And that was 10 years ago for the seat that was formerly known as Freeholder, now called County Commissioner. And then my great mentor, and shout out to in the chat, someone mentioned my amazing great mentor, Sandra. Thank you so much. I think of Sheila Oliver every single day, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver. When she became the Lieutenant Governor, she had asked that I run for her seat in the Assembly. And one of the most amazing honors of my lifetime was to have that conversation with her, and we ran and we won. And now I'm in the state Senate. So for me, it's about impact. I'm an impact chaser. It's about making a difference and having the power of the pen. I believe that every single legislator, particularly minorities, particularly Black peoples, have a duty to be both an advocate as well as a legislator, or an administrator, or whatever seat or title you find yourself in. We also have the duty to be an advocate because of our ancestors. We can't just be happy with these titles. We can't just be here just trying to stay and going along to get along and, making the good old boys proud, and then they love you and that's so great for them. But what difference are we making in our communities? And for me, that's what it's always been about, is making that difference. And as long as I'm here, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight for our communities. I'm going to use that power of the pen to legislate and reverse systemic issues of oppression. And that's really what has launched me into this. But, this election is really, it's dangerous. And I use that word on purpose. It's dangerous because if this does not go our way, we could see the change of our formation of government. The type of government that we have is a democracy. We could literally see that change. And by the way, internationally, democracy, unfortunately, has been on the downtrend. We see the influence of Russia. We see the power plays of the international community. And, when people say something to me about Kamala Harris, I'm like, are you kidding me? You have this intelligent, amazing woman who has served her entire life, who protected children as a prosecutor, and ran for office, climbed through the ranks of the state of California, standing up against a bully and someone who is not even remotely as intelligent as she is, having to prove herself, and this election is going neck and neck. So we have to do everything that we can do to make sure that Kamala Harris wins, and we call her Madam President, and that we save our democracy from dictators, which also is something that's very important to me, Rosalind, because prior to me even starting the land trust, I'm the daughter of an Army soldier, particularly an Army Sergeant First Class, who jumped out of airplanes into war as a part of the elite Army 82nd Airborne. And I watched my father all throughout childhood go and fight dictators and literally either stand on the border for protection like he did in North and South Korea, or lead troops across the desert like he did in Saudi Arabia against Saddam and was there when he lit the oil fields on fire, or stand on the Berlin Wall, which was a wall that was perpetuating a philosophy or a sentiment, if you will, of the ideology of Stalin and Hitler. So, all of these things that are inside of me, all these things that I saw through my childhood and then in my advocacy as an organizer and a nonprofit executive, that is how I got my start. But it's also all of those things that is driving me to push forward as hard as we possibly can to get Kamala Harris to the White House.
Thank you so much, Senator Timberlake. I love so much of what you said, and I'm going to tell on you a little bit and also end up telling on myself. Senator Timberlake organized a group of women to get together to see a relatively new Broadway show called Suffs, and it follows the storyline of the suffragists in the early 20th century who made it such that women have the right to vote. And watching the reenactment was profound because they had so many hurdles, and there were suffragists that died because of the level of exertion traveling during that time period to speak to groups of people in the way that we're able to now just get on Zoom. Before this might have required a whole lot to bring folks together. And what was profound about that experience is we were all like crying at the end. And then I was the one person who like couldn't stop crying. And so then other people around me started crying that weren't crying before. And it was interesting. There was a woman that we did not know from Eastern Europe, a very elderly woman who came up to me and she said, I understand why you're crying. And she talked a little bit about her journey trying to run away from the Soviet regimes, in her time. So definitely not just a American issue. I think women all over the world will benefit from Kamala Harris being elected. And what's interesting, and I want to hear from Melissa, what she views as the common hurdles for women that want to run for office and women of color in particular.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think from my own experience as a Black woman, as a Puerto Rican woman in leadership, I know I have personally experienced racism, microaggressions, overt insults during my career. And that is true of women in leadership across this nation, and particularly women who are running for office. I've had people question my competency in indirect ways, just like they're doing with VP Harris. I have been treated sometimes as a child in the workplace, and I know that other women have had similar experiences. And we've had to be more educated to get into these positions and these rooms than our counterparts. And so, I think it was Michelle Obama who says that, as a woman, we're probably the most educated or qualified in the room, because we are. And it is very hard to get into these leadership positions and even harder to get into elected positions. The reality is people will vote for women and people will vote for women of color, but there are many barriers. It's almost like you have to have the perfect resume, the perfect background. We saw when Stacey Abrams was running, them criticize her for her student loans. The reality is I have student loans. Many of us have student loans because it was the only way for us to get to advance in our careers and advance into leadership. But we do see the Biden-Harris campaign or administration addressing that. And I am sure that Kamala Harris as president will continue to address that. But it's sad that people were viewing her as less than qualified to be governor because of student loans that many, many people have. And so you have these barriers that are put in front of women that are these barriers that all of us experience, but women particularly are held accountable for that men aren't when it comes to leadership and when it comes to women in electoral politics. However, we know people will vote for us if we're on the ballot. It's just getting us on the ballot is harder. So many times we're caregivers. We're caring for not just our immediate family, but our extended family. Many of us have to work multiple jobs, or we're having to work, and that impacts the offices that we can run for. And our networks aren't as extensive as our white male colleagues. So I can't pick up the phone. And somebody who grew up personally in poverty, if I was to run for office, I can't pick up the phone and call a list of people who will max out donations to me. I can call people who will give to me, but they won't max out. So I'm gonna have to do 2 or 3 times the work to raise that money than my male colleagues will. But we know we need women in office. I have seen and I've experienced the issues of not having women in office, and it hurts our communities. Not having women who or people who look like me with shared experiences. haven't seen myself reflected in decision makers, which means I don't see myself reflected in those decisions that are being made. And you mentioned that I was a social worker. Yeah, I was a social worker. And it was 2 things that really drove me to come into the political space. It was Nikki Haley refusing to renew our SNAP waiver. So we kicked about 60,000 people off of food stamps. And then her refusing to expand Medicaid. And so realizing that one decision maker can affect thousands of people like that brought me to emerge where I can help change the face of politics and get more women elected into office who can have a positive impact on the communities that we are trying to serve and the communities across this country, the communities that I was trying to serve as a social worker. So, even though it may be a little harder for women to enter that political landscape, once we're here, we can make tremendous impact. We've seen that with VP Harris coming from DA to president. And the things that she has been able to do and will be able to do as president. We just need to work on getting more women to enter that political space so we can continue to transform our communities and make this country a better country.
Thank you. Thank you. There was so much in there that would require an entire other event to really unpack. So thank you for those insights and for outlining the hurdles, because I think people who are not in the space don't understand what's required to run for office. And then in our modern media climate, to try to buy advertisements, you're talking about thousands of dollars to get a placement on certain platforms, and the prices keep going up. I've never seen them go down. So I hope that as more women come through organizations like Emerge, and we're building a coalition across the entire country, that we'll have that safety net for women who want to run but don't feel as though they have the resources. And to that end, I want to hear from Councilmember Andreu again with regard to how have your personal experiences influenced the policies or initiatives that you've worked on?
Being an educator, it is who I am. I mentioned I've been an educator for over 30 years, so it really drives most of my work. I'm all about making sure that young people in our city have a voice. You know, we talked about the barriers. Melissa did a great job in explaining the barriers, and I want them to see, actually, when I was installed during my first campaign, I quoted Kamala Harris because she was the new VP at the time. And I said, I'm the first, but I won't be the last. And we bring young people into the council chamber to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, to receive awards. And we have a wall in our chamber with every single person's picture up for the last 70 years. So imagine most of the pictures on that wall are white men. And then there's about 5 women, and I'm the only woman of color. So I want, when young girls come in there, my 14-year-old daughter comes into that chamber and they see themselves. And so that is what drives a lot of what I do. But having deep roots in the community, I work closely with our 10 public schools here in the city because I do value education so much. Even this morning, we had Read for the Record, which is a reading initiative across all of Broward County Public Schools. And so we went to schools and read to young students to, again, impart the importance of reading. You know, just like the vice president, soon to be president in a few days, my parents came to this country to get a better education. And they wanted to instill that for my sister and I. And so I just have the fundamental belief that education really paves the way for our future and is the great equalizer. So I do a scholarship for high school seniors every single year. And it's very easy, but again, just to plant that seed and help them with their expenses as they go away to college, and then make them come back, have that commitment that they're going to come back to the city of Plantation and build a family here, and again, continue their business, opening up their businesses here and stimulating our local economy here in the city of Plantation. Another huge, huge part of what I've been doing, and Brittany said it, making change and pushing that envelope has been working with our police force. We are the only city in Broward County that does not have police body cameras. So that has been one of the heaviest lifts, but I'm proud to say we're starting the pilot right now, and we will have police body cameras very soon. Again, going back to the whole George Floyd incident. So just so many initiatives, and it really has been building that coalition, getting others involved, because Melissa touched on it, that microaggression and not feeling seen and heard. So many times I sit next to my counterparts and they'll repeat what I say as if it's a new idea and a new initiative. I had just recently, I was trying to present a proclamation, and you know, my colleague wanted to take the proclamation out of my hands and read the proclamation because they felt like they should be presenting it. I said, when you write it, you can present it. You need to sit down. So, you know, it shouldn't have to always be that assertive and that aggressive, but we have to find our voice and make sure that we utilize it. And again, take up space so that people know we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we are going to make an impact in our communities.
Thank you. And I feel like this forum organically has turned into a lot of knowledge sharing, and new connections have been made such that we're able to look at maybe what's working in a certain area and bring it to others. And so I know that Senator Timberlake has been successful in really fighting that fight around body cameras with law enforcement, as well as legislation to change the short sale process, because there are people all over the country that are struggling, that are losing their homes. And so I believe the model that she has built in this area will influence other leaders to really reform that space. So, Senator Timberlake?
Yeah, you know what? I really love what you said, Councilwoman. I just want to encourage you to keep going and don't ever give up. And it sounds like you won't. You came into this for the right reasons and you're keeping that at the forefront. And I'm so excited to share this space with you. About 10 years ago, we led the initiative for the body cameras for our county sheriffs. And this is pre-George Floyd, and even pre-Castillo. And we really were working hard. We were getting a little bit of pushback, but ultimately, it got implemented. And then we have that now statewide. And we also, when I went to the assembly, I mentioned my mentor, Sheila Oliver, who went to become the lieutenant governor. And there was a bill that she had started when she was in the assembly. And it was another honor of my life to finish for her. And that was the independent investigation in the event someone loses their life during interaction with law enforcement, pre-George Floyd and his unfortunate death. And by the way, it's always really bothered me that it took that unfortunate death, as heinous as it was, for our country to seemingly have this awakening to hear our cry as Black peoples, because I can think of, unfortunately, other heinous deaths that have occurred. And in the year that I mentioned, we got the body cameras, that the officer had shot Philando Castile. I believe his 4-year-old daughter or one of his babies was in the car. That was just grotesque. And Sterling as well that summer. Just horrible. But I say that to say that, it's the personal experiences. I heard one of the speakers, mentioning their brother. And getting that bill passed, the independent investigation, 1 year prior to Floyd, in a Democratic majority, the bill only passed by 1 vote. And I had to debate my colleague in caucus who was against it, who I had seen as a mentor of mine, and also had to respectfully tell the Attorney General, who was the highest law enforcement official in our state, why he was wrong, because he came out against it. His name was Grewal at the time. He had since also, after the death of George Floyd, apologized for that, and I accepted his apology, but unfortunately, it's part of the history of the story. And the things that we have to do as Black women to stand up to authority and risk our positions. Risk, people saying, well, here she is, she's being a gadfly again. To say to the Attorney General, no, you're wrong. To say to the PBA, the statewide PBA, who was, pushing not to have that bill enacted, it was a very, very big deal. We protested. There was organizations involved. Faith in New Jersey staged sit-ins in the blistering cold. They staged sit-ins, and we fought so hard until that bill not only passed, but was then signed by the governor. It was a fight all the way until the end. And I remember that 1 vote that I mentioned it passed by actually came from an Orthodox Jewish man, the only Orthodox Jewish man in the legislature. And I had looked him in the eye prior to walking out on the floor, because the prosecutors were calling around telling their state legislators not to vote for it. Okay? And I had to look him in the eye and I said, listen, this could save the life Of my little boy, at the time, I only had two. We're a blended family, one who was around the age of 14 or 15. And then I had a little boy who was about one or so, who was already the size of a 3-year-old, who's going to grow up and be just as big and beautiful and Black as his daddy and his granddaddy, right? So I looked Gary Scheer, Assemblyman Gary Scheer, in the eye, and I said, please, I need you to vote for this because it could save the life of my son. And in the clutch, when that board lit up, and you have to get 41 votes, and there was only 40 votes on the board, I looked at him and I said, I need you. And he hit his button, he voted for it. We closed the board and we never looked back. So, when we talk about our experiences and what shapes us, it's that and what we bring as women, what we bring as mothers, but also the courage that I have and that I exude does too come from my parents. I told you about my father. You have to have courage to do what he did. He wasn't the average soldier. You had to have a lot of courage to be in his unit. And you have to have courage in general to serve your country, even if you don't see war. So shout out to all the veterans, whether or not of foreign wars or domestic, we love you. But also my mom, who is Caucasian, protested the Klan when I was in the 3rd grade in Hope Mills, North Carolina, as they came to march through where we used to play at Hope Mills Lake. And she organized a peaceful protest against them. And she brought my brother and I have to tell you, that was life-changing. To watch my mother stand up against hatred and to stand there with her 2 Black children and to be heckled by the Klan and to watch her heckle them back, it was all courage. And there were more community members in opposition to their hatred than there were in support. So the organizing that she did was successful. But again, that lens always shapes what I do as a legislator and what I do even outside of the legislature as an advocate.
Thank you so much, Senator Timberlake. And I'm deeply inspired by that story because I think people want to assume that the Klan and certain domestic terrorist groups are something of 100 years ago. And that is not the case. And
Yep.
I'm glad to know that you were inspired by that experience to be where you are. And to that end, I want to ask the last question of the panel to Melissa about why is it important to build community and coalitions with other marginalized people, and how have you done that, and how can someone on this call today that has no background in organizing and all these things that I think we sometimes take for granted when we're so involved, how do we start that? How do we build bridges?
Yeah, so I think about the work that we do at Emerge. We recruit, train, and develop and elect women to office at all levels of government. And the coalitions make me think about the Emerge network. I think about my own network. I like to call on my squad, that when times get hard or I have big decisions to make about my career and things of that nature, I go to my squad, my group of friends that support me and encourage me, and they're part of the reason I can do this work. And for the Emerge Network, that is the squad of the Emerge alum. They are there for each other, supporting each other. And so, that network really does provide a unique experience for the women who come through the training program, because being in elected office can feel very lonely. And if you don't have that support, things can be even harder than it needs to be. Whereas we try to create that network, and it happens organically, really, where that network is formed in almost like a sisterhood for each other, and the Emerge alums support each other. And speaking of the coalition, also since Chauncey took the helm at Emerge, we've made the decision to center women of the new American majority in our training programs. So that's Black, Brown, Indigenous women, women of color, young, unmarried, and LGBTQ plus women. We know that it's critical for these communities not just to have a seat at the table, but to be at the head and to set the agenda. We can't get our issues passed or taking into account if we're not setting the agenda. So it's not enough just to be in the room. We need to be at the head of the table. We know that those closest to the problem should be closest to the solution. And so it's also critical that you have relationships with other women of the new American majority outside of their own communities who can be critical in passing that legislation and acting those policies to change our communities and give our communities what they deserve. And that's why we have Emerge. So, at Emerge, we've trained over 6,000 women. We have over 1,200 in office and have had an 81% success rate in our primaries this year, have over 500 candidates on the ballot. But it's like you said earlier, the 6,000 is not enough. So, I speak to the women out there that I hope that we look at the original Emerge woman, Kamala Harris. Our organization was founded off of the inspiration off of her run for DA, with her and her friends who were in the political space, realizing that we needed more women to run for office and we needed an infrastructure to support women. And you see where that has gotten her. So I hope that the women who are listening to this will be inspired by VP Harris's trajectory and run to consider running for themselves. And I think that's the way that we all can do things, is really run for office. I hear people tell me that, oh, I'll work behind the scenes, I'll work for a campaign. Well, if there's no campaign to work for, what are you going to do? So we have to have people running. I like to say that no one's coming to save us, but have to save ourselves. So we need women who are going to run, who have experienced these different things in life, who can bring that experience into elected politics. But then we need people to vote for them. And we need people to work on their campaign. And as the councilwoman said, it's not cheap. Or you think you say, Rosalind, it's not cheap. It's not free. Things are going up. There is money in politics because, especially for non-incumbents, they have to get their name out there. That mailers, postcards, the door knocking, the robocalls, the text messaging, that all costs money. So if there is a candidate that you like and you want to see her cross that finish line, you've got to invest in that candidate, invest in that race, volunteer for that race to help her get over the finish line, especially with women of color, to make sure that we're able to elect more women of color to office, or be part of her kitchen cabinet, be part of that squad to support her to make things less lonely. One program that we've started Emerge to make things less lonely for Black women specifically is our Seated Together program. And that is for Black elected women who are seeking higher office, because again, we know that we have unique challenges in electoral politics. And I'm proud that one of the first Seat at the Table graduates from South Carolina was my own senator. And so the work that we're doing, the people on this call, not only are we just saying, please turn out for VP Harris, the policies that she's going to pass as president, the policies that the councilwoman or the senator passes, we're all impacted by those things. So the work that we're doing, a little selfishly, is for our own communities, to make sure that our communities thrive, to make sure, as someone said, their brother thrives, that their nieces and nephews thrive. And so we all have to lean into this work together. And again, financially supporting, volunteering for, being on the kitchen cabinet of women who are running for office, and running for office yourself, so that we have great candidates to choose from, so that our own communities can thrive off of this. So, I'm excited about this election, really. I'm excited about having an Emerge, woman at the top of the ticket, and all throughout the ticket, and not just, again, the top, but all the down ballot races that we get to vote for, and to see the transformation that will happen for our communities, and to realize if we don't vote in this election, it may literally be the last opportunity we have to vote. So it's important for us to all do our part. Even though I do this full time with work, I'm doing this through my civic organizations and service organizations. I'm still finding time to phone bank for the Harris Walk campaign because this is important to me and this is important to my family and my friends.
It's wonderful, Melissa.
I know that we're virtual on Zoom, but if we were all in person, I would say rousing applause for everyone that spoke on the panel tonight. Councilmember
Thank
Andreu,
you.
Senator
Thank you for
Timberlake,
having us.
Melissa, and what's really great about all of these organizing calls that have been happening on Zoom, and I know Karen is still with us and can speak to this. We have the live event, right? But then the event is reposted somewhere, and you just don't know in the World Wide Web who you're going to inspire to take action. So I just want to thank all of you for your commitment to making progress in your communities and our broader world. And I'm just so glad that you all were here tonight. So thank you. So we have two remaining speakers who are very accomplished women who also have gone through seasons of fighting the good fight in order to get things done. So, Gutelli Nicolas Ruiz is also from the Sunshine State and Broward County, and she has over 25 years of experience across public, private, and nonprofit. She was born in Haiti, but raised in New York. And before, yes, I know, raising hands. And she's very skilled at organizing. So some of the things that the panelists spoke of, she's done it at different levels. I know she was very involved with the Haitian Democratic Club as well as other organizations. So I'm really excited to hear her remarks, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. And Rosalind, thank you so much. I feel so privileged to be in this space with all of these accomplished individuals. And I think we all share a passion. But before I start with my story, I really want to shout out to Councilwoman Jennifer Andreu. I am a Plantation resident, and I have to tell you, she really has changed the direction of Plantation. You know, she's a little modest, but she created the Sustainability and Resiliency Advisory Board. And I know it was not easy for her. So she's doing some wonderful things. And I'm just so pleased to have her as my councilwoman. A little bit about me. Again, my name is Gatel Ruiz Nicholas. I was born in Haiti. And I happened to come to the United States under the dictatorship of Papa Doc. My parents had to fly. They had to really leave Haiti in order to remain in life. I was 7 years old. When they came to the United States, they put me and my two sisters in boarding school in Haiti. And at the age of 11, I migrated to New York, where I joined them and my brothers and spent a good portion of my life there. And I have to tell you that the only thing they always said is you got to get an education, because they saw it was really one of the ways to really become somebody and make a difference. My life truly changed when I came to a conference in Florida in the 80s. At the time, you had a lot of the boat people fleeing Haiti. And I was very, how would I say this? It was frustrating. It was also, I felt they were not being treated with dignity. And I remember my father having a conversation with him, and I said, my goodness, this is so different than New York. Why are they treating Haitians the way that they are treating them here in South Florida? And he says, well, what are you going to do about it? It doesn't make sense to complain. What are you going to do about it? So at that particular time, I felt he also gave me the responsibility for my community. And that's how I became civically engaged with a passion. I really wanted to make a difference in empowering my community. And I bring this story only to say that when you look at the Haitian diaspora, we are very new to democracy. Most of our lives, at least in my life, Haiti was governed by a dictator. So imagine what it will be like to have somebody like Trump govern the United States. It's deja vu. It is a hell for the people who live there. I became engaged not only in empowering my community, working on different organizations, nonprofit organizations, serving on boards, but also I realized that as new citizens, it was important for them to understand the political system here in the United States. So it became my mission, serving on the Haitian American Democratic Club, working with the Caribbean Democratic Club, the Hispanic Unity, coalescing with a number of different organizations to really kind of get allies to really empower this particular community. So for me, this election is probably one of the most important elections that I am experiencing. Although I was very involved with Obama, with Hillary, this one, it means so much. It's really, we need to vote as if our life depends on it. And what fueled us this year is, of course, the statements that Vice President candidate J.D. Vance and Trump started out with this whole nonsense about how we're eating people's pets. That was the impetus and the catalyst for me to really motivate the community. So we really started to work with the grassroots community, making them understand how important this election is. Very often, we have people working several jobs, and really, at times, the elections may not be a priority. And I have to say, I am extremely encouraged. Faith leaders who are usually very rigid about certain things and about Democrats versus Republicans being nonpartisan. This year, we had a luncheon with faith leaders, not only Catholics, Baptists, Seventh-day Adventists, to really make them understand what is at stake. And it is really important for them to be engaged. To my surprise, I was pleasantly surprised to see how receptive they were to really getting involved, allowing us to register congregation members to register to vote, to request their ballot by mail, and ultimately next week on the 3rd of November, we have 4 different churches that we will have souls to the polls, where we will be busing the congregations to go out to vote. So for us, this was a very big change because in all the years I've been involved, this is the very first time I actually saw a core group of about 20, 25 faith leaders saying, we are with you because we cannot let this happen, realizing that if the wrong person gets into power, what will happen to their congregations? What will happen to certain industry? When you get into healthcare, when you go into the hospitality industry, the majority of the people working there are immigrants, either from Jamaica, from Haiti. They are actually carrying these industries. So they recognize the importance of really being engaged themselves, as well as ensuring that their congregation members are involved. The other thing we saw happen this year is a group of leaders got together. We were able to raise $25,000 to put billboards in Palm Beach County, in Broward County, in Miami-Dade County, boldly saying, Haitians for Kamala. And we say, imagine this gentleman going up and down the highway, singing those signs. So that was a motivation for us to just let him know, no, we do not eat cats. We do not eat dogs. We are actually people who can vote, and we are going to vote this year. So a group of us, we have made it a mission for us. We're canvassing 3 times a week. On an average day, we canvass between 80 to 110 doors. We do it on Mondays, Saturdays, and Sundays. We do phone bankings Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings. We also, the phone banking, the canvassing, the billboard, it's really those are ways we've gotten our community really energized to really get the votes out. Now, in terms of the policies, obviously, I think one of the common agendas we as a community decided to come up with, obviously, women with reproductive rights are very important to us. And we really had to make the faith leaders understand it's not just about abortion. If you have a daughter who has a difficult pregnancy, guess what? That baby may have to die in her stomach before they can remove it, or the daughter's life may be at risk. Immigration policy is very important to us. We've heard that there's going to be mass deportation. We cannot allow that to happen because currently our country is going through major, major chaos politically, where gangs really are making, there's a lot of violence currently. So not only these people cannot go back home, if they cannot go back home, imagine, we're just envisioning tents, people under tents, thousands of people under tents until, it is determined whether or not they should stay or whether or not they should go back to Haiti. And Haiti does not have the capacity to take all of those individuals back. So, when you look at social justice, many of the families are experiencing people in jail. I go and visit the jail, and primarily you are looking at young men between 18 and less than 30 years old. And guess what? It's either because the parents do not have the means to get the right attorney for them, or they do not understand the system to really get them out there. So our community requires a lot of education, a lot of civic engagement, and so forth. So we really, and I have to tell you, this year I have worked harder than I have ever worked because of what is at stake. Democracy is at stake. I cannot experience another dictatorship. My family cannot experience another dictatorship. If home was good, we could say we can go back home to Haiti, but home is not good. So we have the fight here, we have to win it. Win it not only for us, but for those who cannot vote, for those who are at risk of being deported. And I want to end by saying that many of the individuals who came by boat in '86, where my father gave me that responsibility, what are you going to do to better your community? I have to tell you, their children are attorneys, their children are doctors, their children are all types of profession and business owners. So we come here to the United States not because we want to. Sometimes we have no choice. But once we get here, we work very hard. We are high contributors to the fabric of American society. So with that said, I am very encouraged by what is going on. We are part of history making. We are going to get Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Walz in power. And I don't think of any option. We just got to continue to work hard, and I think together we can do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your remarks and everything that you have done to move us forward. And I love what you said about reproductive rights because it's so unfortunate that we're at this point in history where we're still fighting over a woman's right to choose when there are so many other facets of reproductive care that are not being addressed. And the one that I'm the most passionate about is obstetric violence and the fact that there are women being mistreated in hospital settings and doctor's appointments. And so I have not even seen at a national level anyone driving the conversation effectively to inspire policies. But then again, I have to remember we're still fighting over a right to choose. So thank you for highlighting that. And I do want to give a quick shout out. I had a lot of political mentors, but when I was a very enthusiastic young person in corporate America, there was a woman that poured into me, and I see her on the call, Amanda Wilshire Crane, and I've never expressed it, but she just made a tremendous difference in my career and my understanding of how Fortune 500 business works and what those unspoken rules are and what it takes for women in that environment to advance. So I just want to thank her for everything that she's poured into me and for being here tonight. And I know she is an honorary Bayesian by way of her husband. So thank you. Um, on I think it was August 1st that we had the first Caribbean Diaspora for Kamala Harris call, and I I don't think we really knew what we were doing. We were just here. We were fired up. It was only a few days or so after President Biden had endorsed VP Harris, and we had just opened up the line. We had speakers, but we also had attendees that asked questions and gave remarks. And the one that really just took my breath away was the Honorable Donna McLeod, who is a former Georgia State representative who has been a fierce advocate for women, for Black women in particular. If you all remember the incident where the governor of Georgia had another state representative arrested because she knocked on his door to talk about a policy initiative. So there's so much that could be said about that we have even the people at the forefront leading our community are being not given the respect that they deserve, such that you can't even have a conversation with some of these people. So I want to turn it over to her to close us out, and I'm so grateful that she's here.
Thank you, Rosalind, and thank you and big up to the Caribbean Diaspora for Harris. I am Jamaican born, the first Jamaican born to serve in the Georgia House of Representatives. And when the ladies were talking about sticking to it, I remember I was endorsed by the sitting president at the time, Barack Obama, in 2016. I lost that race by 222 votes because people were, I guess, turned off by both Trump at the time and the First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton, and 2,100 people didn't vote in my district, and so I eventually went out in 2017. So I lost in 2016 by 222 votes, and in 2017 I went out and I knocked all 2,100 doors that did not show up, and in 2018 I was elected with almost 4,000 more votes than my opponent because of tenacity. That's what women have to do We cannot wait for anyone to put us at the table. We got to put ourselves there and make sure it happens. So I want to just say that, of course, I am Jamaican born. I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother. In fact, my daughter turned 38 today, so I had to go to dinner with her first. And there's a rally down here today with the Vice President and former President Barack Obama, and people are excited. I am reporting from a battleground state of Georgia. And we've been under pressure, so we know pressure, and we do cool like that because we're big like that. And as a Jamaican, enough respect. It's not a slogan for us; it's a way of life. And so, I'm honored to be here. I am a business owner as well, a chemical engineer by profession. And I wanted to kind of start to talk a little bit about. I don't know, everybody was talking about what's at stake, but what's at stake? We're talking about this Project 2025, and I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail, but I think it's important because I think several people touched on education. And we've got to remember one of the single most important thing that happened after slavery ended was Black folks, these ex-enslaved people, were given the ability to read and write. And we cannot take it for granted how important that is. My grandmother could not read and write, and I remember the day we sat down with her, and her name is McLeod. We call her Madamak. And when we showed her how to write her name, she looked at it and she said, "Is that my name?" And we said, "Yes." And from that day forward, she signed everything she could possibly sign with her name. And so we just need to remember just how much education matters, right? For us to be competitive in this global market, it matters. If it wasn't for the board of the Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, we would not, all of us, this ability to get funding for schools would not have existed. So just to know that this felon sat on a stage and said that he wanted to get rid of the Board of Education, and indirectly it would impact us because 90 to 95% of our kids are educated in the public school system. So for us, it is critical, it is dangerous, and we better remember this when we're going to the ballot box to vote, because our kids are at stake right now. That is how important this vote is. I also wanted to talk about the fact that they want to put the DOJ, the FBI, the Federal Board Bureau of Investigation, and the FCC, the Communication Commission. So, the DOJ, if it wasn't for the DOJ, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 would not even have happened, right? Because we needed to take it out of the state. And I want to break it down just simply. The state has so much power, right? State have so much power because it was states that wanted to hold on to slavery. It was the federal government had to step in. And that's why it is important for people to actually pay attention to their local elections, because that's where the laws matter the most. Because if you do not have laws that matter in the state of any state you live in, then the federal government has to step in. But if there is no laws to combat that state law stands. That's how important it's important to pay attention to state laws. Imagine if this felon is now in charge of the federal communications, then basically anything he wants to disseminate as, communication, he would be able to do that. There would be no barriers for him spewing propaganda. And I think we have to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of thinking that it's not going to happen. We don't have Roe versus Wade anymore, and that's a fact, right? It's not a thought anymore. It's gone. And I remember my daughter saying to me, "Mommy, they wouldn't do that." Well, let me tell you, when Georgia introduced the 6-week abortion ban, and I was all over the media, this is important for us to understand how simply things can be undone. Everybody talks about the fact that we have a right to vote. No, we do not have a right to vote. We have the ability to vote. The only people written in the Constitution with a right to vote are white men that own land. We are not that. And so 2/3 of Congress can undo all of that. And the folks that actually did Project 2025 is actually folks that I'm already familiar with, because they're the ones that actually pushed the legislation for the 6-week ban in the Georgia House. I am very familiar with the Heritage Foundation. And so we need to understand that these people work tirelessly. They don't get tired, because for them, power is everything. So if they lose power, I think they'll just feel like they're going to explode. They can't share their space with us because they think they have to own it. They have to have supremacy. And again, I ain't going back with their boo-boo. Their boo-boos ain't going back. I ain't going back with them. And I'm sure none of you are going to want to go back with them. I'm not going back. So I think it's very important that we understand just what 2/3 of Congress can do. That's why you need to vote up and down the ballot when you go into that booth. Also, I wanted to just touch on the fact that, you know, as a person who earned my citizenship, I had to, you know, pay for it and also study and do the citizenship. I urge everyone that is an American born not to take this for granted. This is not a democracy. It is a republic. And that means that it requires your participation. How we get democracy is by participation, right? Because the people are the government. And people get confused. Everybody likes to lump everything into, oh, this is all political. No, it's not. Politics is what we practice when we're trying to convince you to vote for us over someone else. That's the political part. The bigger part is the governance part, in which you and I pay taxes and somebody at the table is making a decision with that money. And you better believe you want somebody at the table that can ensure that you get the service you desire and need to make sure your life is good in this country. We all pay taxes. That's why you need not worry about all the little details, because I'm telling you, if you think that your vote don't matter and you're not going to vote, trust me, somebody's there. They're going to make sure that their vote matters, and they're going to make sure that they're being heard and that there are policies that reflect them over you. So I'm just giving everybody that warning. And I heard somebody talk about environmental issue. Okay, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they want to basically put that out for the highest bidder to make it a, what you call it, I guess, like a business, right? They want it to be a business. So you're not gathering facts and data. And I am an engineer. So for me, data, facts, theory is one thing, but you have to prove theory. And so I think it's important that we fight for science, STEMs, make sure that our kids are learning these things and factually putting forth data and making decisions based on the facts and the data that are presented to them. And I ask you right now to go to iwillvote.com and make sure that you know where you're going to go vote, that you see because on our ballot, we also have a sample ballot. Download that sample ballot, research it, fill it out if you need to, but make sure you are ready to vote and go vote. When they say make a plan, I mean make a plan. Make a plan to vote. Do not sit there and say, oh, maybe I'll work on election day. Well, election day is the last day. We're in season of voting. We don't do election day voting. We do season voting now. We start with our early voting, absentee voting, vote by mail. We got lots of choices. So let's make sure that you know which one you want to do. And again, I want people to take action, make sure you're ready to vote. And being in a battleground state, we're always under pressure. We delivered 2 senators to the United States Congress, and we are about to deliver a president who is named Harris, who happens to be a Jamaican of Jamaican parents, and we are ready to go. We are not going to back down from nobody, and all the Caribbean diaspora join in. Let's get this done. Tomorrow is not promised, but I tell you what, I already voted. So even if I die tomorrow, she's already got my vote. So I'm grateful for that. And I've always ended everything by saying, knowledge is the most powerful thing you give to yourself, but the vote is the most powerful thing we give to each other. Let's make sure that our vote is being heard. We have the power. We have numbers by the droves, because you know what? As Caribbean people, we are massive. We truly are. We are massive. We got generations of our descendants in and around the United States. So we don't have to worry about it. If we get out there and vote and we tell everybody to get out and vote, let's do this. And especially as women, we've got such power. Let's do it. Let's do it. Because to whom much is given, so much more is required. Thank you very much.
Hallelujah. That's all I can say, because that's where you brought me with your remarks. And I wish there was an honorable Donna every time I was making my morning coffee, because I feel like I would just be fired up and ready to go and conquer the world. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for all
Thank
that
you.
you've done.
Thank you.
Definitely. And
Thank you. And remember, iwillvote.com. Please go. Please go.
Yes.
And Rosalind, you are just amazing person, really. You have given of yourself. You have included and brought in people, and you have not been afraid to share the space. And also, Karen, I was on the show with Karen a few weeks back. And so you two ladies, I appreciate you for making sure that we have a platform in the diaspora and making sure that we are being heard.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
This was
you.
great.
Thank you. And I think Brianna is still here. So there's something you said, Donna, that really stood out to me about who was born where. And I think as a diaspora, we have to get past that, because so many times I've watched other cultures where the descendants maybe have never been to the country, but they were raised by immigrants somewhere else, and they have infused the culture that was brought with them with their environment. And so I think it's important that whether you came here as an immigrant, whether you're first generation, second generation, third generation, we are all family, and we are all valid in our pride for the Caribbean community. And I want to give a shout out to Patrick Reed, who runs Roadblock Caribbean Radio. I spoke on his program on Sunday, and the consensus with all of us that were speaking is that it's time to drop any egos that prevents us from being unified. And I'm just so grateful to have met amazing people throughout this cycle. And I know my grandmother is watching. She is 89 years young. And after the last rally, she called me to say, I'm just so glad you're keeping good company. So I thank you everyone for being here. I will send out the links for the volunteer opportunities and information, and just thank you everyone for your time, your energy, your passion, and let's elect Kamala Harris as president. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Rosalind.
Thank you.
So amazing, all of you speakers.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Recording stopped.